The neon sign of Miller's Diner flickered against the midnight drizzle, a relic of an era that pretended to welcome everyone but still whispered the word, separate. Beneath its smile, the clink of coffee cups, the low hum of an old jukebox, and the hiss of bacon hitting the griddle filled the small-town eatery. Most nights, it was quiet, a place where truckers and late shift workers grabbed a meal before heading home. But tonight, the silence broke the moment she walked in. Her name was Keisha Grant. To most strangers, she was just another tired traveler seeking warmth from the road. A black woman in her 30s, dressed in jeans and a leather jacket still damp from the rain, she carried herself with a calm that only those who had faced storms greater than the weather could understand. Her gaze was steady, her steps purposeful, but humble, never demanding attention, yet impossible to ignore. She didn't come to make a statement. She came for coffee, maybe a slice of pie, and a quiet seat in the corner. But the men at the counter saw her differently. 4 of them, burly and loud, wearing leather vests with patches that reeked of exclusion, turned their heads as the door closed behind her. Their laughter stalled, their eyes narrowed, and their posture shifted like wolves scenting a lone traveler who had wandered too close. One muttered under his breath, loud enough for the others to hear. Another smirked, nudged his friend, and the ripple of disdain spread through the group. Keisha ignored them at first. She had practiced this kind of silence for years. It wasn't new to her. Small-town diners could be unpredictable places, but food was food, and dignity was dignity. She slid into a booth near the window, glancing at the laminated menu more out of habit than hunger. The waitress, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes, hesitated before approaching. She clutched her notepad, glanced at the men, then back at Keisha. Her voice trembled just enough to betray the fear behind her words. "Coffee? Or something else?" Keisha offered a gentle smile. "Coffee's fine, thank you. Black. And maybe a slice of that pecan pie if you've got it fresh." The waitress nodded quickly, scribbling the order, but her shoulders tensed. She moved as if carrying the weight of everyone else's stares. At the counter, the leader of the group, a man with a scar cutting through his left eyebrow and a sneer carved into his face, leaned back on his stool. "This ain't your place," he said, his voice carrying just enough to silence the room. Forks paused mid-air. Conversation stopped. Even the jukebox seemed to fade. Keisha didn't look up. She traced her finger along the rim of the menu, calm, steady. Scarface continued. Louder this time. "You heard me. This diner's for folks who belong here, white folks." Gasps broke the quiet. The waitress froze at the coffee pot. A trucker in the corner shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. The weight of history pressed down on the room, the kind of moment that tested not just courage, but character. Keisha's lips curved, not into a smile of mockery, but into the subtle acknowledgement of a storm she'd weathered before. She finally lifted her eyes, meeting his glare with a gaze that didn't flinch. "Funny," she said softly. "I didn't see that written on the door." The men laughed, harsh and hollow. Scarface slapped the counter, amused at her defiance. "Smart mouth. But let me make it real clear. You can drink coffee somewhere else. Not here." The waitress set the cup down in front of Keisha, her hands shaking, then scurried away, caught between duty and fear. The room felt like it was holding its breath. Every eye was locked on the booth by the window, waiting to see if she would leave quietly or stand her ground. Keisha wrapped her hands around the mug, inhaling the warmth as if drawing strength from its steam. She didn't rush. She didn't argue. She simply took a sip, savoring the bitter richness of the coffee. Her silence was louder than their threats, and for a moment, it unsettled them. But men like Scarface mistook calm for weakness. He pushed back from the counter, boots thudding against the worn floor. His gang followed, forming a wall of denim, leather, and intimidation as they moved toward her booth. The diner shrank with each step they took. A young couple near the door exchanged nervous glances. An older man adjusted his hat, his eyes flicking to the window, as if weighing the risk of leaving. No one spoke. No one moved. Keisha set her cup down gently. She looked up at the men towering over her, their shadows stretching across the table. Her voice, when it came, was steady. "You don't want to do this." The gang burst into laughter again, but their leader leaned closer, placing both hands on the table, his face inches from hers. The stench of tobacco and stale beer clung to his breath. "Lady," he sneered, "I do what I want. And I'm telling you, you don't belong here. You either walk out that door, or we'll help you find it." Keisha held his gaze. Her eyes didn't waver. They didn't beg. They didn't plead. For a brief moment, something flickered in his expression, as if he sensed a depth he couldn't quite name. A storm behind calm seas. A strength he didn't yet understand. But bravado drowned it out, and he leaned back, smirking at his crew. "Looks like she don't get it." One of the men cracked his knuckles. Another shifted his weight, ready to escalate. The diner's silence deepened into dread. Keisha breathed in slowly, her chest rising with quiet control. Memories flickered at the edges of her mind, not of fear, but of discipline, of nights on foreign soil where silence meant survival, of drills that taught her how to read danger before it struck. She had faced men more dangerous than this, in places far more unforgiving. And she had walked away, not because she was lucky, but because she was trained. She hadn't come here to fight. But if they forced her hand, they would discover a truth their arrogance had blinded them to. The scarred man cracked a grin, thinking he had already won. Last chance. Sweetheart, stand up and leave. Keisha tilted her head, her calm unbroken. "I already told you," she said, her voice a quiet warning. "You don't want to do this." The tension snapped like a wire pulled too tight. Keisha's words hung in the air, a quiet storm that unsettled more than the laughter that had echoed seconds before. Scarface's grin faltered, just enough for one of his men to notice. He barked a laugh, slapping his thigh, desperate to drown out that flicker of unease. "She thinks she's tough," one muttered. "We'll see how long that lasts." Scarface straightened, cracking his neck as he glanced at the others. "Teach her a lesson. Show her what happens when someone doesn't know their place." The gang moved in, their boots scraping against the tiled floor, their shadows stretching wider across the booth. The diner seemed to shrink, the smell of grease and coffee drowned out by the pounding of hearts. A mother pulled her child closer. The young couple near the door froze, their hands intertwined beneath the table. Everyone knew what was coming, but no one dared to intervene. Keisha's hands remained on the table, her posture still, almost meditative. Her eyes tracked each man's movements. The way one favored his left leg, the twitch in another's shoulder, the nervous energy behind bravado. She read them like a book, every detail an open page. Her calm wasn't ignorance, it was calculation. The first man lunged, reaching for her arm. In a flash, Keisha shifted. She slid out of the booth with a fluidity that defied the cramped space. In one motion, she caught his wrist, twisted, and sent him sprawling onto the table. Dishes clattered, coffee spilled, and gasps erupted around the diner. The move was clean, precise, almost effortless. Scarface blinked in shock, then snarled. "Get her." The second man charged, swinging wide with his fist. Keisha ducked low, pivoting on her heel, and drove her shoulder into his midsection. His breath exploded out of him, and before he could recover, she hooked his ankle, sending him crashing to the floor. The sound echoed like thunder against the silence of onlookers. The diner was alive now. Chairs scraping, people standing, some whispering in awe, others terrified to even breathe. The third man hesitated. He wasn't expecting resistance, not from her. His hesitation was all Keisha needed. She straightened, eyes locked on him, her voice calm but sharp as steel. "Walk away. Now." "But pride is a cruel master," he growled, swinging his fist toward her face. Keisha sidestepped, catching his arm mid-swing, redirecting his momentum with surgical precision. His own force betrayed him, sending him crashing into the edge of the counter. Glass shattered, plates rattled, and he groaned in pain. Scarface's sneer had vanished. His jaw tightened, and for the first time, uncertainty clouded his eyes. Still, arrogance pushed him forward. He reached into his jacket, pulling out a chain he wrapped around his knuckles, metal glinting under the fluorescent lights. "You think you're special, lady. You don't know who you're messing with." Keisha's gaze locked on him, steady and unyielding. "And you don't know who you just threatened." The room seemed to hold its breath again. The waitress clutched the counter, her knuckles white. The trucker in the corner leaned forward, muttering under his breath, "She's handling him like a soldier." Scarface swung, chain whistling through the air. Keisha's body moved with instinct born of years on the field. She sidestepped, grabbed his arm, and twisted. The chain clattered to the floor as he cried out, his face contorted in pain. She pressed him against the booth, her voice low enough for only him to hear. "You wanted to humiliate me. You wanted to make me small. But I've fought wars you can't even imagine. I've stared down men with more power and more hate than you. And I'm still standing. You're nothing but noise." Scarface's bravado shattered. His breath came ragged, his pride bleeding out with every word she spoke. He struggled against her hold, but it was useless. Keisha's grip was iron, forged in years of training and discipline. She released him with a shove, sending him stumbling into his own crew. The gang, beaten and humiliated, scrambled to regroup. They glanced at one another, confusion replacing confidence. The third man, still holding his side, muttered, "Man, she ain't normal. She fights like..." His voice trailed off, the realization dawning. Keisha bent down, picking up the chain, her fingers steady. She set it on the counter, her movements deliberate, calm. Then she turned back to them, her voice carrying the weight of command. "You've got one chance to leave. Take it. Before you regret staying." The silence stretched, broken only by the hiss of the griddle. Then, one by one, the men backed away. Their pride was bruised, their power broken, and the eyes of the diner bore witness to it all. Scarface growled, pointing a finger at her. "This ain't over." Keisha met his glare without blinking. "It already is." The gang retreated toward the door, their swagger gone, replaced by the stumbling gait of men unmasked. The bell above the door jingled as they disappeared into the night, leaving behind only the smell of fear and the weight of a lesson unlearned. For a long moment, the diner was still. Then the whispers began. "Did you see that? She took them all down!" Like a professional. The waitress approached cautiously, her hands trembling as she refilled Keisha's coffee. "I don't know who you are, honey," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. "But I know you just saved this place from something ugly." Keisha gave a small nod, sipping her coffee as though the storm hadn't just passed. Her calm returned, the mask of ordinary life sliding back into place. "I didn't save anyone," she said quietly. "I just did what needed to be done." But her words only deepened the mystery. To the onlookers, she wasn't just a woman anymore. She was something more. Something they didn't yet understand. As she lifted the fork to taste her pie, a memory flickered across her mind. Sand, heat, the roar of helicopters overhead, orders barked in the chaos of combat. She wasn't in the diner anymore. She was back where discipline had been carved into her bones, where fear had been silenced by training. And as she blinked, returning to the present, she knew the night wasn't over. Because men like Scarface didn't accept humiliation quietly. They would be back. And when they returned, she would be ready. Rain tapped against the diner windows, streaking the glass in crooked rivers that caught the neon glow. Inside, the hum of conversation began again, but quieter, cautious, as though everyone feared their voices might shatter the fragile calm left behind. Keisha sat with her coffee, savoring it sip by sip, her expression serene. To the casual eye, she looked unchanged, just a woman enjoying her drink. But inside, her senses were sharp, her thoughts racing. She knew the gang's pride had been torn open in front of too many witnesses. Men like that didn't just walk away. They licked their wounds, gathered reinforcements, and came back louder, meaner, and more dangerous. The waitress hovered nearby, wiping the same counter over and over though it was already spotless. Her eyes darted toward the door. "They'll be back," she murmured, half to herself, half in warning. Keisha didn't look up. "I know." The waitress hesitated. "You should leave before." Keisha finally raised her gaze, soft but steady. "I don't run." The firmness in her tone silenced the rest of the sentence. The waitress nodded slowly. A mix of fear and admiration etched across her face. At the far booth, the trucker who'd been watching leaned forward. His voice was gravelly, cautious. "Lady, you handled yourself better than most men I've seen. That wasn't no bar fight. That was training." Keisha gave a small, noncommittal smile. "You noticed too much." The trucker shrugged, sipping from his chipped mug. "Send my share of soldiers. I drove convoys for the army back in the day. Men don't move like you did unless they've been taught." Keisha didn't confirm, but her silence spoke louder than words. The trucker chuckled softly. "Thought so. Well, just know, folks around here, they don't forget what they saw, good or bad." Before Keisha could reply, the door creaked open. Everyone stiffened, expecting the worst. But it was only a young boy, no more than 12, dripping wet from the rain. He clutched a paper bag to his chest and shuffled to the counter. The room exhaled in unison. The waitress hurried over, fussing over him. Keisha's eyes lingered a moment before drifting back to her coffee. Yet even in that fleeting distraction, her mind replayed the fight. Every movement, every angle, every threat neutralized. Her training never let her stop analyzing, never let her drop her guard. It hadn't always been that way. Her thoughts carried her back, years before this quiet storm in a diner, to the barracks where discipline was drilled into her bones, to endless days of push-ups under the scorching sun, instructors barking until voices grew hoarse, to nights where fear had no place, because fear meant mistakes, and mistakes meant lives lost. She remembered the first time she deployed overseas, the dry heat searing her lungs, the constant hum of tension in every patrol. She'd been underestimated then, too, by enemies, by allies, by anyone who thought her size or her gender meant she'd break. But she hadn't. She'd endured, she'd led, and she'd returned with scars that told stories words never could. And now, in this nowhere town, those same instincts hummed through her veins. She didn't want this fight. But she wasn't about to let fear draw the lines of where she could exist. The bell above the door jingled again. This time, it wasn't a boy. The first figure stepped in, rain dripping from his leather jacket. Behind him, two more followed, their boots heavy against the tile. They weren't the same men as before. These were bigger, harder, their faces carrying the cold look of men who'd been called in to clean up a mess. The diner hushed again, tension snapping taut. The boy at the counter froze mid, bite into his sandwich. The waitress stiffened, eyes flicking nervously toward Keisha. Scarface wasn't with them, but his shadow was. These were his reinforcements. The largest of the three scanned the room, his gaze landing on Keisha instantly. "You're the one who embarrassed my brothers." His voice was low, gravelly, dangerous. Keisha didn't flinch. She set her fork down gently, dabbing her lips with a napkin. "Embarrassment is earned, not given." A ripple of whispers spread through the room. The man's jaw flexed, his knuckles tightening. "You've got a smart mouth, but it won't save you." Keisha leaned back, calm as ever. "Neither will ignorance." The men advanced, slow and deliberate. The young couple by the door slipped out, not daring to stay. The trucker muttered under his breath, "Lord help us." The biggest man reached the edge of Keisha's booth, towering over her. His shadow swallowed her frame, but her eyes held steady. "Stand up," he demanded. "We're taking this outside." Keisha's voice was quiet, but it carried. "If you want to do this, we do it here. I don't dance for bullies in the rain." The man's lip curled. "Fine." He swung a meaty hand toward her shoulder, intending to drag her up by force. But Keisha moved first. Her hand shot up, catching his wrist in midair. She twisted, pulling him off balance, and in one fluid motion drove her elbow into his ribs. He staggered, shocked at the force, pain radiating through his chest. She rose from the booth in the same motion, fluid and powerful, no wasted movement. The second man lunged, but Keisha sidestepped, hooking his arm and flipping him over the back of a chair. He crashed to the floor, stunned, his head smacking against the tiles. The diner erupted into gasps, dishes rattling as chairs scraped in chaos. The third man hesitated, circling her like a predator unsure of its prey. He jabbed once, testing her reflexes. She parried with ease, her eyes locked, her breath steady. The second jab came faster, but she redirected it, her hand snapping his wrist aside. Then she struck, 2 quick blows. A strike to the solar plexus and a sweep to his leg. He collapsed, groaning. The biggest man roared, charging again, fury blinding him. Keisha pivoted, grabbing a chair and using it as leverage to slam into his knees. He buckled, crashing down. She stepped in close, her hand gripping the back of his neck, pressing him to the floor. The room was silent, every witness frozen. Keisha leaned in, her voice a whisper sharp as a blade. "Tell Scarface this is the last time. Next time he won't walk away." The man growled but didn't fight. He knew. He felt the strength in her hold. The kind of strength that came from more than muscles. It came from years of training, from wars fought far from home, from resilience carved in fire. Keisha released him with a shove. The 3 men scrambled to their feet, their pride crushed. They backed toward the door, eyes wide with disbelief. One spat on the floor, but even his gesture was hollow. They fled into the storm, leaving the diner stunned once more. Slowly, the whispers began again. The boy at the counter grinned wide, his sandwich forgotten. The trucker shook his head in amazement. "Lady, you ain't just tough. You're trained. Ain't no denying it now." Keisha sat back down, reclaiming her fork, her demeanor as calm as if she'd just stood from stretching her legs. She took another bite of pie, the sweetness grounding her in the moment. But inside, she knew the storm wasn't done. Scarface wasn't the kind to take defeat lightly. And when pride and hate mixed, danger always followed. She sipped her coffee, her eyes narrowing toward the rain, slick glass. Somewhere out there, the gang was regrouping again. And this time, they wouldn't just come with fists. The rain outside thickened into a steady curtain, hammering the diner's tin awning like a warning drum. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the parking lot in blinding white flashes, shadows jerking across the asphalt. Inside, the tension lingered, thicker than the steam rising from fresh coffee pots. Keisha had faced storms before, storms of bullets, storms of fire, storms that left scars you couldn't see. But this storm was different. This one wasn't about survival in a foreign land. This was about dignity, about the simple right to sit in a booth and drink coffee without being told she didn't belong. She stirred her cup slowly, her reflection rippling in the dark liquid. Around her, the diner buzzed with whispers. The waitress leaned against the counter, shaking her head in disbelief. The boy grinned, eyes wide, as if he were watching a superhero movie come to life. The trucker lit a cigarette despite the "no smoking" sign, muttering, "Ain't seen anything like that since Nam." The door creaked again. Everyone flinched. But it was only the sheriff, stomping rain from his boots. His uniform was damp, his belt heavy with the weight of small town authority. His eyes swept the room, catching the nervous faces, the broken chair, the spilled coffee. "What happened here?" he demanded, his voice firm, practiced. The waitress started to speak, but the trucker cut her off. "Gang trouble. Those black vultures again. Came in swinging at this lady here." He jerked his thumb toward Keisha. "She sent 'em packing." The sheriff's eyes narrowed at Keisha. Not hostile, cautious. He was trying to piece the story together. "Is that true?" Keisha set down her spoon, meeting his gaze evenly. "They came looking for trouble. I just ended it." The sheriff studied her a moment longer. Something about her calm unnerved him, but it also reassured him. He'd seen fear before. This wasn't fear. This was control. "Well, you best be careful," he said finally. "Scarface don't take humiliation lightly. He'll be back. And he won't come alone." Keisha nodded once. "I know." The sheriff sighed, rubbing his temples. "I'll do what I can, but you know how it is around here. Folks like him got friends in places they shouldn't." The words hung heavy. Corruption. Bias. The quiet alliances that let gangs fester in the cracks of small-town law. Keisha had seen it overseas, too. Different uniforms. Same rot underneath. She didn't argue. She simply sipped her coffee, her mind already shifting into the mental drills she'd practiced countless times. Assess threats. Secure exits. Plan contingencies. Hours passed. The diner thinned as storm and fear drove customers home. By midnight, only a handful remained. The trucker, the boy, the waitress, and Keisha still at her booth. The sheriff had left, his patrol car headlights fading into the night. The boy, curious and bold, finally broke the silence. "Miss, how'd you do all that?" "The flips, the punches, you fight like a superhero." Keisha's lips curved in the faintest smile. "Not a superhero, just trained." "In what?" the boy pressed. Keisha hesitated, her mind flickering with memories she didn't share lightly. Then, softly, she said, "The Marines." The trucker let out a low whistle. The waitress's eyes widened. The boy's jaw dropped. "No way." Keisha nodded, her expression distant. "Way." The boy leaned forward, excitement spilling from him. "Did you go to war? Did you fight bad guys?" Her eyes softened, though her voice remained steady. "I fought for people who couldn't fight for themselves. Sometimes that meant bad guys. Sometimes it meant storms, hunger, things you can't punch your way through. War isn't like the movies. It doesn't end when the credits roll." The boy nodded, half understanding, but still dazzled. "But you won tonight. You beat Keisha's gaze shifted to the rain-streaked window. "For now. But battles don't end because one side walks away. Sometimes they just come back louder." As if on cue, the low rumble of engines rolled through the night. Deep, guttural, menacing. Headlights flared across the parking lot, slicing through the storm. One bike, then another. Then a whole line, filling the lot with chrome and thunder. The waitress gasped, dropping her rag. The boy's eyes widened in fear. The trucker cursed under his breath, grinding his cigarette into the ashtray. Keisha rose slowly, her chair sliding back with a soft scrape. Her hand brushed her jacket, checking the weight of the pocket knife she carried. Not her weapon of choice, but better than nothing. She didn't plan to use it unless she had to. Her body was weapon enough. Engines cut off. Silence pressed in. Then the diner door swung open. Scarface entered first, rain dripping from his hair, his scar more pronounced in the harsh light. Behind him, a dozen men crowded in, leather vests soaked, boots stomping mud onto the floor. Their presence filled the room oppressive and heavy. The waitress backed away. The boy shrank into his seat. The trucker reached for the pocket knife he kept in his boot, but froze when he realized he was outnumbered. Scarface's grin was gone. His face was carved with rage, his eyes locked on Keisha. "Thought you could embarrass me," he snarled. "Thought you could humiliate my brothers. Tonight you learn what happens when you cross us." Keisha stood tall, her shoulders squared, her breath steady. "You had your chance to walk away. You chose pride instead." A Scarface sneered. "And you chose the wrong town." The men spread out, circling, cutting off exits. The storm outside raged, lightning flashing across the glass, thunder shaking the floor. Inside, another storm brewed, one made of hate, pride, and the quiet strength of a Marine who refused to bow. Keisha's eyes flicked around the room. Every face mattered. The boy, the waitress, the trucker. Innocents trapped in a war they hadn't asked for. She'd faced this before. Protect the civilians. Neutralize the threat. Stand your ground. Scarface stepped closer, his voice low, venomous. "No one's here to save you now. Not your army. Not your country. You're alone." Keisha's jaw tightened. Her reply was calm, but her words struck like lightning. "I've never been alone. Every soldier I served with, every battle I survived, they're with me. In every move, every breath, every step. And that's more than you'll ever understand." A Scarface's fist clenched. His men shifted, ready to strike. The diner braced for impact. And Keisha, standing in the center of it all, was ready to unleash everything the corpse had taught her. Scarface lunged first, his rage boiling over. His punch came fast, heavy, but sloppy, fueled by anger, not skill. Keisha sidestepped, grabbed his wrist, and twisted. Bone cracked, and Scarface howled, dropping to one knee. The gang roared, surging forward as one. Chairs scraped, glass rattled, the whole diner trembling under the storm of boots and fists. But Keisha moved like water, fluid, precise, unstoppable. She ducked a swing, drove her elbow into a gut, pivoted, and kicked another man's legs from under him. Two down before they even knew what hit them. The trucker, inspired, sprang into action. "Ain't leaving her to fight alone!" he bellowed, tackling one of the bikers. The boy, wide-eyed, grabbed a ketchup bottle and hurled it at another, smacking him right in the forehead. The waitress ducked behind the counter, calling 911 with trembling fingers. Keisha's training took over. She kept her movements economical, efficient. Every strike disabled. Every block protected someone behind her. One biker swung a chain. She caught it midair, yanked him forward, and sent him crashing through a booth. Another charged with a knife, but Keisha twisted his arm, the blade clattering harmlessly to the floor. Scarface, clutching his broken wrist, staggered up with a snarl. "You think this changes anything?"
"You're just one woman."
Keisha's eyes burned with quiet fire. One woman was all it took. She drove her fist into his gut, then spun, landing a kick square to his jaw. Scarface crashed into the counter, shattering sugar jars and coffee mugs, before collapsing unconscious. The diner went still. The gang members groaned on the floor, defeated, scattered like fallen dominoes. The storm outside began to ease, the thunder rolling away into the distance as if the heavens themselves knew the battle was over. The boy broke the silence first. She beat 'em all. His voice trembled with awe. "She's like Captain America, but real." The trucker chuckled, wiping blood from his lip. "Nah, kid. She's tougher than any superhero I ever heard of. She's a Marine." The waitress, still clutching the phone, looked at Keisha with tears in her eyes. You saved us. If you hadn't been here." Her voice cracked. Keisha shook her head gently. "I didn't save you. We stood together. That's what makes the difference." Sirens wailed in the distance, flashing red and blue growing brighter outside the rain-streaked windows. The sheriff burst back in, jaw dropping at the scene. Bikers sprawled across the floor, scarfs out cold, Keisha standing tall but calm. He looked at her, then at the others, then back again. Slowly, he tipped his hat. "Wes, this town owes you more than coffee." Keisha gave a faint smile, sliding her jacket back over her shoulders. "All I wanted was coffee. The rest, that was just principle." She turned, leaving the diner as dawn broke through the clouds, the first light of morning cutting across the wet pavement. Behind her, the boy whispered with unshakable reverence, "That's what a real hero looks like."